She spit blood at his feet and cursed his name. "You killed my daddy, Sheriff Cole. And now you own me too." But what she didn't know was that the man she hated most in the world had been keeping her father's darkest secret for 20 years. The morning sun beat down on Tombstone's dusty main street like a punishment from God himself. Sheriff Cole Matthews stood at the edge of the crowd, his weathered hands gripping the brim of his hat so tight his knuckles had gone white. The auction block in the center of town square was stained dark with old blood and older sins, but today it held something far more dangerous than any outlaw they'd ever hanged there. Black Jack Morrison's daughter. Ruby Morrison stood defiant on that cursed platform, her wild red hair catching the desert wind like flames. Even with her hands bound behind her back, even with the purple bruise blooming across her left cheek, she looked every inch her father's child, fierce, unbroken, deadly as a rattlesnake in tall grass. "What am I bid for this fine specimen?" hollered Ezra Thorne, the town's fat auctioneer, his voice cutting through the desert air like a rusty blade. "She's got her daddy's fire, but she's young enough to tame. Good for cookin', cleanin', and whatever else a man might need on those long winter nights." The crowd of men pressed closer, their eyes hungry and cruel. Cole felt his stomach turn. These weren't decent folk looking for a housekeeper. These were vultures, circling something wounded and beautiful, ready to tear it apart. $20, shouted Marcus Webb, the banker's son. 30, called out Tom Fletcher, who ran the saloon. Ruby's green eyes swept across the crowd with pure venom. When her gaze landed on Cole, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "Go ahead, Sheriff," she spat, her voice carrying clear across the square. "Bid on me like I'm some prize heifer. Finish what you started when you put that bullet in my daddy's heart." Cole flinched like she'd slapped him. The crowd murmured and shifted, sensing drama. They all knew the story. Sheriff Cole Matthews had tracked Black Jack Morrison for 3 long years across desert and mountain, through canyon and creek, and 3 weeks ago, in a shootout outside the Silver Dollar Mine, he'd finally put the infamous outlaw in the ground. What they didn't know was that Cole had been carrying Black Jack's dying words in his coat pocket ever since. Words that changed everything. Words that made him sick to his stomach every time he looked at the red-haired girl who hated him more than poison. $40, someone shouted from the back. 50. The bidding climbed higher, and Cole watched Ruby's face grow paler with each raised voice. She was trying to look brave, but he could see the fear creeping in around the edges. She was 19 years old, alone in the world, and about to be sold to the highest bidder like a piece of livestock. Cole's hand moved to the folded paper in his vest pocket. The letter was written in Black Jack's own crude handwriting, smudged with blood and desperation. He'd pressed it into Cole's hand with his dying breath, made him swear to read it, made him swear to do right by the girl. But doing right by Ruby Morrison meant living with a lie that would destroy them both. $75. Webb shouted, his face flushed with excitement. 80, Fletcher countered. Ruby's eyes found Cole again, and this time there was something else there besides hatred. Something that looked almost like hope, as if maybe, just maybe, the man who'd killed her father might also be the one to save her from this fate. Cole closed his eyes and saw Black Jack Morrison's face one more time. Bleeding out in the dirt, his breathing shallow and weak, pressing that damned letter into Cole's palm. "She ain't who you think she is," Black Jack had whispered, his voice barely audible over the desert wind. "Read the letter, Sheriff. Read it, and you'll understand why I can't let her end up like this." Now, standing in the blazing sun with Ruby's hatred burning into him like a brand, Cole finally understood what he had to do. $100. His voice cut through the crowd like a gunshot. Every head turned toward him, eyes wide with surprise. The auctioneer's hammer froze in midair. Ruby stared at him in shock, her green eyes wide and unreadable. "No," she whispered, so quiet only he could hear. "Not you, anyone but you." But Cole was already pushing through the crowd, his long legs carrying him toward the platform. He pulled out his leather purse and counted out the gold coins, each one falling into Thorne's greedy palm with a soft clink. "Sold," the auctioneer declared with obvious satisfaction, "to Sheriff Matthews." The crowd began to disperse, already moving on to the next bit of entertainment. But Ruby didn't move. She stood frozen on that platform, staring down at Cole with a mixture of disbelief and fury that made his chest ache. "Why?" she demanded, as he climbed the steps to untie her bonds. "Why would you do this? You already killed everything I loved. What more could you possibly want from me?" Cole's fingers worked at the rough rope around her wrists, trying not to notice how soft her skin was, or how she smelled like sage and wildflowers despite days of captivity. "Maybe I got reasons you don't know about," he said quietly. "Reasons." She jerked away from him the moment her hands were free, rubbing at the raw marks on her wrists. "The only reason you'd want me is to hurt me. To make me pay for what my daddy did." Cole lifted his eyes to meet hers, and for a moment, he saw something that made his heart stop. She had Sarah's eyes, not just the color, but the way they flashed when she was angry, the way her left eyebrow lifted just a fraction when she was trying not to cry. Sarah, Ruby's mother. The woman Cole had loved 20 years ago, before duty and honor had torn them apart. "Come on," he said gruffly, taking her elbow. "Let's get you cleaned up." Ruby wrenched her arm away. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "I'd rather be sold to Fletcher or Webb than owe anything to you." "Well, that ain't how it worked out," Cole replied, his voice harder than he intended. "You belong to me now, legal and proper. That makes you my responsibility." The word belong hit Ruby like a physical blow. Her face went white, then flushed red with rage. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "My daddy taught me that. The only thing your money bought you was trouble, Sheriff, more trouble than you can handle." Cole looked at her standing there in the blazing sun, her red hair wild around her shoulders, her faded dress torn and dirty, but her spirit still burning bright as a forge. She looked so much like Sarah it made his chest tight, but she had Black Jack's defiance too, that stubborn pride that had gotten the outlaw killed in the end. "We'll see about that," Cole said finally, and turned to walk away. Ruby had no choice but to follow him through the dusty streets of Tombstone, past the curious stares and whispered comments. Cole's house sat at the edge of town, a modest adobe structure with a covered porch and a well-tended garden. It was clean and orderly, nothing like the rough camps and hideouts she'd grown up in with her father. "You can have the back room," Cole said, as he unlocked the front door. "There's a wash basin and clean clothes in the chest. We'll talk about arrangements after you've had time to get settled." Ruby stepped inside cautiously, like she expected a trap. The interior was neat and sparse, furnished with handmade furniture and decorated with only the bare necessities. No photographs, no personal touches. It felt like a place where someone lived but didn't call home. "Why?" she asked again, softer this time. "Why did you buy me? If you're planning to hurt me, I'd rather you just get it over with." Cole turned to look at her, really look at her, and felt that familiar ache in his chest. "I ain't gonna hurt you, Ruby. You got my word on that." "Your word?" She laughed bitterly. "The word of the man who murdered my father? That's supposed to make me feel safe?" Cole's jaw tightened. "Your father was an outlaw, Ruby. He robbed banks, killed innocent people. I was doing my job. He was all I had." The words exploded out of her like a gunshot, raw and painful. "He wasn't perfect, but he loved me. He took care of me, and you took him away from me like he was nothing." Cole watched her shoulders shake with suppressed sobs, watched her fight against the tears that threatened to spill over. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to comfort her, to tell her the truth, to explain everything. But the letter in his pocket felt like it was burning a hole through his vest. "Get some rest," he said. "Instead, we'll talk tomorrow." That night, Cole sat on his front porch with a bottle of whiskey and Blackjack Morrison's letter spread open on his knee. He'd read it so many times the creases were starting to tear, but the words never got any easier to swallow. "Sheriff Matthews, if you're reading this, then I'm dead, and Ruby's alone in the world. I know you got no reason to help her, seeing as how I put you through hell these past few years, but there's something you need to know about the girl. She ain't mine. Oh, I raised her like she was my own flesh and blood, loved her like a daughter from the day Sarah put her in my arms. But her real daddy is someone else entirely. Someone who deserves to know the truth, even if it's too late to do anything about it. Ruby was born 9 months after you left Sarah in Silver Creek. 9 months after you told her you couldn't marry an outlaw's sister and rode out of town with your tail between your legs. Sarah never told you she was with child. Never told you she had to marry me to give the baby a name. That little girl sleeping in the jail cell right now? She's got your eyes, Cole. Your stubborn streak. Your sense of right and wrong, even if she's been raised to hate everything you stand for. She's your daughter. I'm asking you to take care of her, not because I deserve any favors from you, but because she deserves better than what this world's likely to give her. She's got too much fire in her to be some rancher's drudge, too much spirit to be broken by men who see her as nothing but Black Jack Morrison's spawn. Tell her the truth, or don't. That's your choice. But keep her safe. Give her a chance at the kind of life Sarah wanted for her, the kind of life you would have given her if you'd known. Jack Morrison. P.S. Mitu's Sarah never stopped loving you. Thought you should know that too. Cole folded the letter with shaking hands and took another long drink from the bottle. Inside the house, he could hear Ruby moving around in the back room, probably trying to find a way to escape. She didn't know that he'd already removed the window latch and locked the back door. He wasn't taking any chances on her running off into the desert to die. His daughter, the girl who hated him more than anything in the world, was his own flesh and blood. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering over the distant mountains. Cole woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, which surprised him until he remembered he wasn't alone anymore. He found Ruby in the kitchen, standing at the stove with her back to him. She'd managed to wash the worst of the dirt from her hair and dress, but she still looked thin and tired. "You didn't have to cook," he said carefully. Ruby didn't turn around. "I figured I should earn my keep somehow, since you paid good money for me." The bitterness in her voice made Cole wince. "Ruby, about yesterday." "Don't," she spun to face him, her green eyes blazing. "Don't you dare try to make this into something it's not. You bought me because you wanted to own something that belonged to Black Jack Morrison. Well, congratulations, Sheriff. You got your prize." Cole opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. How could he explain without telling her everything? How could he make her understand that he hadn't bought her out of cruelty or revenge, but out of love for a daughter he'd never known he had? "Eat your breakfast," he said instead. "We got things to discuss." They sat across from each other at his small kitchen table, the silence heavy and uncomfortable. Ruby picked at her food, while Cole tried to figure out how to begin. Finally, he pulled the letter from his pocket and set it on the table between them. "Your father gave me this before he died," Cole said quietly. "Said I should read it. Said it would help me understand some things." Ruby's eyes fixed on the blood-stained paper like it was a snake about to strike. "Things about you. About your mother. About why you're here instead of in some orphanage back east." Ruby's hand shot out and snatched the letter before Cole could stop her. Her eyes moved quickly across the page, and Cole watched her face change from suspicion to confusion to absolute shock. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is a lie. This has to be a lie." "Ruby?" "No." She stood so fast her chair toppled backward. "My daddy was Black Jack Morrison. My mother died when I was born. I don't know why he would write such lies, but—" "Your mother didn't die, Ruby." Cole's voice was gentle but firm. "Sarah lived. She lived and she loved you, and she married Jack Morrison to give you a name because she thought I was never coming back." Ruby stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're lying. You're lying to me because you want to hurt me more than just killing my daddy did." Cole stood slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. "I got a photograph," he said quietly. "In my bedroom, a photograph of your mother that I've carried for 20 years. You want to see it?" Something in his voice must have convinced her, because she nodded mutely. Cole disappeared into his bedroom and returned with a small daguerreotype in a silver frame. He handed it to Ruby with trembling fingers. The woman in the photograph was young and beautiful, with red hair and green eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She was laughing at something outside the frame, her head thrown back with pure joy. Ruby's knees gave out. She sank into the chair, staring at the image with wide, disbelieving eyes. "She looks like me," she whispered. "You look like her," Cole corrected. "Exactly like her. From the first moment I saw you, I knew, even before I read Jack's letter, I knew." Ruby set the photograph on the table with shaking hands. "If this is true," she said slowly, "if you're really my father, then why did you leave her? Why did you abandon us?" Cole felt like he'd been gut-shot. "I didn't know, Ruby. I swear to you, I didn't know Sarah was carrying my child. If I had, you would have what? Come back? Married her? Raised me?" Ruby's voice was rising with each word. "Or would you have done exactly what you did do, chosen your badge over your family?" The accusation hit home because it was true. Cole had left Silver Creek because he couldn't bear the thought of being connected to the Morrison family, even through love. The Morrisons were outlaws, rustlers, thieves. Marrying Sarah would have meant giving up his dreams of being a lawman, of making something respectable of himself. "I was young," he said finally. "I was stupid and proud, and I thought being a sheriff was more important than anything else in the world. And now?" Ruby's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Now that you know the truth, what happens to me? Do you still think your badge is more important than your daughter?" Cole looked at her sitting there in his kitchen, so much like Sarah it made his heart ache, but with Black Jack's fire burning in her eyes. She was wild and dangerous and beautiful. And she was his child. His responsibility. His second chance at the love he'd thrown away 20 years ago. "No," he said quietly. "No, I don't." The storm that had been threatening all morning finally broke that afternoon, sending sheets of rain across the desert and turning the streets of Tombstone into rivers of mud. Ruby stood at the kitchen window, watching the water pour down from the dark sky, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "I used to dream about having a real father," she said suddenly, her voice so quiet Cole almost didn't hear it over the rain. "Someone who would teach me to read properly, who would protect me from the worst of Daddy's business associates. Someone who would love me just because I was his little girl." Cole's throat tightened. "Ruby. But you know what's funny?" She turned from the window to face him, and he could see the tears she'd been holding back finally spilling over. "The man I dreamed about looked nothing like you, because you were the enemy. You were the one we were always running from, always hiding from. The boogeyman who was going to take my daddy away and leave me all alone." "I never wanted to hurt you," Cole said desperately. "But you did know." Ruby's voice cracked like a whip. "Maybe not about me, but you knew about my mother. You knew she loved you, and you left her anyway. You chose your precious career over her heart, and she had to marry an outlaw just to survive." Cole flinched, as if she'd struck him. "Sarah made her choice. She could have told me about the baby. She could have what? Begged you to come back? Forced you to marry her out of duty instead of love?" Ruby laughed bitterly. "She had more pride than that. More than you deserved." The words hung between them like smoke from a gun barrel, acrid and painful. Cole wanted to defend himself, to explain how young and foolish he'd been, how much he'd regretted leaving Sarah every day since. But looking at Ruby's tear-streaked face, he realized that explanations didn't matter. What mattered was what happened next. "You're right," he said simply. "I failed her. I failed you. But I'm here now, and I want to do better." Ruby wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so childlike it made Cole's chest tight. "Why should I believe you? Why should I trust the man who killed the only father I ever knew?" "Because," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion, "because despite everything, you're still here. You could have run last night. You could have taken a knife from the kitchen and slit my throat while I slept, but you didn't. Maybe there's a part of you that wants to believe I can be better too." Ruby stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, truth, maybe, or hope, or just the shadow of the man her mother had once loved. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded slowly. "One chance," she said finally. "You get one chance to prove you're not the man I thought you were. But if you hurt me, if you betray me the way you betrayed my mother, I'll make you pay for it. I promise you that." Cole nodded solemnly. "Fair enough." That evening, as the storm continued to rage outside, Cole and Ruby sat by the fireplace and began the long, difficult process of getting to know each other. Cole told her about his childhood in Kansas, about his dreams of becoming a lawman, about the loneliness that had driven him from town to town for 20 years. Ruby spoke haltingly about life with Black Jack, about the constant fear and uncertainty, about the strange loyalty she'd felt to a man who'd raised her as his own despite the danger it brought. "He wasn't a good man," she admitted, staring into the flames. "I know that. He hurt people, stole from them, killed when he had to, but he loved me. In his own twisted way, he loved me." "I know he did," Cole said gently. "A man doesn't write a letter like that unless he loves someone more than his own life." Ruby glanced at him. "Do you think my mother would have wanted this? You and me trying to be a family?" Cole considered the question seriously. "I think Sarah wanted you to be happy, to be safe, to have choices she never had. If that means giving me a chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning, then yes, I think she would have wanted this." The days that followed were awkward and tentative, like two wild animals circling each other, testing boundaries. Ruby helped with the cooking and cleaning, but refused to let Cole buy her new clothes or personal items. She was polite but distant, calling him sheriff instead of anything more personal. Cole, for his part, tried to give her space, while still keeping a careful eye on her. He taught her to read better using old newspapers and dime novels. He showed her how to handle a gun properly, though he was secretly terrified by how naturally it came to her. Most importantly, he listened when she talked about her dreams. Dreams of seeing the ocean, of living in a real city, of having friends who didn't know or care about her father's reputation. It was 2 weeks after the auction, when Ruby finally called him by his name. They were in the garden behind the house, Ruby helping him plant vegetables for the coming season. It was honest work, the kind Cole had never imagined Black Jack Morrison's daughter would take to, but Ruby seemed to find peace in the simple rhythm of digging and planting. "Cole," she said suddenly, her voice hesitant. He looked up from the tomato seedlings he was transplanting. "Yeah. I've been thinking about what you said, about having choices." She sat back on her heels, wiping dirt from her hands. "I want to go back to school. I want to learn things, real things, not just how to read wanted posters and count stolen money." Cole felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "There's a good school in Phoenix, run by a woman named Mrs. Henderson. She takes in girls who need a fresh start." Ruby's eyes lit up with hope. "You'd let me go, even though I'm still angry with you? Even though I might never forgive you for what you did?" "Ruby," Cole said seriously, "you're not my prisoner. You never were. If going to school is what you want, then that's what we'll do." But, he hesitated, then forged ahead. "I'd like you to think of this as your home. No matter where you go or what you do, you'll always have a place here. With me." Ruby was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes studying his face. Then slowly, she smiled. The first real smile he'd seen from her since that day on the auction block. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay, Daddy." The word hit Cole like a lightning bolt. He'd been called many things in his life: sheriff, sir, bastard, hero, killer, but never Daddy. Never by someone who meant it, someone who'd chosen to give him that title despite everything he'd done wrong. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Ruby stood and brushed the dirt from her skirt. "Don't thank me yet," she said, with a hint of her old fire. "I'm still Black Jack Morrison's daughter even if I'm yours too. That means I'm going to be nothing but trouble for the rest of your life." Cole grinned, feeling lighter than he had in years. "Well then," he said, "I guess it's a good thing I like trouble." 3 months later, Cole stood on the platform at the Tombstone train station, watching Ruby board the westbound to Phoenix. She looked older somehow, more grown up in the blue dress he'd bought her, and the small hat perched on her newly tamed red hair. But her eyes still held that familiar fire, that Morrison's stubborn streak that would serve her well in the world. "You write to me," he called as she reached the train car steps. "Every week," she promised, turning back to smile at him. "And you write back. None of that strong, silent sheriff nonsense." "Yes, ma'am," Cole said with a grin. Ruby hesitated for a moment, then ran back and threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered in his ear. "Even when I hated you, I think I loved you too." Cole held her tight, memorizing the feel of her in his arms, the smell of her hair, the weight of her trust. "I love you too, baby girl. More than you'll ever know." As the train pulled away, taking his daughter toward her new life, Cole felt in his pocket for the letter he'd started writing the night before. It was addressed to Sarah Morrison's grave in Silver Creek, the first of many letters he planned to write to the woman he'd loved and lost. Dear Sarah, it began. Our daughter is beautiful and brave and strong, just like you. I think you would be proud of the woman she's becoming. I know I am. The train disappeared around a bend in the desert, carrying Ruby toward her future. But Cole wasn't sad. For the first time in his life, he had something worth living for, something worth being better for. He had a daughter who'd chosen to love him despite everything, and that was a gift more precious than all the gold in the Arizona Territory. If this story of forbidden love and family secrets touched your heart, if you believe that even the darkest betrayals can lead to the brightest redemptions, then you're in the right place. Here at Western Love Stories, we bring you tales that echo long after the last word fades, stories of courage in the face of impossible odds, love that survives against all expectations, and hearts brave enough to forgive the unforgivable. Subscribe to Western Love Stories, and never miss a tale from the land where bullets may fly, but hearts always find their way home. Because out here, love isn't just a feeling, it's an act of courage that can change everything.